And today, we have Sergei Ivanovich Suhonos, a Russian cosmologist and systemologist, as a guest. Hello, Sergei Ivanovich. Hello. The theme, as far as I understand it today, is the large-scale harmony of the universe. That's what it's called. Where do we start with you? Well, first of all, let's start by explaining what a systemologist is, because the term is actually in the encyclopedia, but it's not really on the ear. There is a system analyst, there is a system administrator, and a systemologist is a person who studies the world from the point of view of the systemicity of this world. In other words, the logical foundations that are laid in this world, they exist. They can be interpreted in different ways, but the easiest thing for me personally, for example, is to study their world from the point of view of the logic of systems, because the world is systemic. That's why the systemologist. I really like this term. Now, essentially, the question. Before I start showing the screen, and we will discuss all this later, I would like to ask you one question practically. As I understand it, you probably received your education in the Soviet Union, judging by my opinion. That's right. I managed to do it. Yes. Yes, I was born in the 50th year, so this whole post-war story of a very rapid development of science and technology, I have it not from books emphasized. Before my eyes, all this was happening. I remember myself when I was running as a little kid, when the first satellite was launched, we were screaming there. Here, I was running half-naked when Gagarin was launched too. It was all in my memory, so to speak. And all these events, including the appearance of iPhones and everything else, it happened throughout my life. Therefore, for me, for example, scientific and technological progress in the 20th century, this is not some kind of abstraction read out of books, but this is all that I have experienced in my life. This is the first one. Second, at the end of the 20th century, there were a lot of discussions in popular science magazines about what to call the 20th century, how to define it. And there were such names. This is the age of atomic energy, the age of space, the age of chemistry, the age of genetics, the age of peaceful coexistence, for example, the second half. There were many different definitions, and it was only when I began to study the large-scale harmony of the universe that I realized that all of these definitions are actually facets of one common definition, because the 20th century can be called the century of a breakthrough, a completely new large-scale dimension. Which facets, I'm going to show it now, are the cosmos, genetics, and all other things. But it's hard to single out one thing, right? It's the same. In fact, this is, I call it, an unnoticed revolution. That is, an unconscious revolution in the consciousness of mankind. It is the fact that humanity is actually the most important event in the 20th century. It is missed by analysts. Why? Because humanity is just, like the camera shutters open, and suddenly you see something that you haven't seen before. And now the same thing happened in the 20th century. The large-scale curtains have opened to incredible horizons. We're going to show it now. And humanity saw the world in the depths of the microcosm and in the macrocosm. Because the microcosm, in fact, was discovered on the border of the 19th, 20th century. And Hubble also built and watched the megamirror with its galaxies. It was also opened in the beginning. This all happened during the 20th century. What this has led to, we will now see with you. Well, that's how my task is to give a more meaningful picture of this revolution that took place in the 12th century. Let's start the slideshow. The revolution began, in fact, in the Renaissance, when humanity suddenly realized that it did not live under the dome. First it was Copernicus, then it was Kepler, then Galileo, Newton. Sooner or later, but everyone realized that this mythical star dome does not exist, on which the stars are nailed with gold nails. There are no epicyclic orbits that P. Hume described, but there is some kind of bottomless space, in which these stars are distributed, and moreover, there are also galaxies that all this has gone. And that's how I depicted it. That is, 4 millions of years, well, and they're hundreds of thousands of years, tens of thousands of years. Man has explored the world without instruments, without a telescope, and without a microscope. He saw what he saw. And what can the human eye see? The human, I can see a microscopic speck of dust measuring 0.2 of a millimeter. Well, it's some little flea, or a little piece over there. That's it. He can't get any deeper. He can't even see any cells. Not to mention there's DNA, and there's their molecules. This is generally to the human eye. Not even a log in your eye. Well, about logs, yes. Well, everyone says, well, of course, he saw the sky, and the sky is bottomless. Yes, He saw it, but the idea was about the sky such that you can climb up the stairs there, or build a Tower of Babel, or walk through these skies. There was such a performance. In fact, the horizon in the human mind was something like this, hundreds of kilometers. Because from Mount Olympus, well, let's say we take the Greek civilization, so they climbed Mount Olympus. They did not rise, but mentally. They saw the horizon. This is a horizon of hundreds of kilometers. That is, hundreds of kilometers on the one hand limited our perception, and the person actually imagined that it was possible to almost throw a stone to heaven there. And on the other hand, these microscopic particles, if you turn it all into some logarithmic measurements and build a scale, then on this scale, you see perfectly. So what is there? Here is a man, as it were, in the center. The higher it rises is kilometers, hundreds of kilometers into the city. Then the Earth, he did not understand it anymore, that it has such a scale. I didn't understand the sun either, but some scientists did. But the sun was depicted as some kind of disk. It could even be stolen in some myths. I'm also silent about the stars. They were just in some hats of golden nails. A galaxy no one knew, but this galaxy too. Down, a speck of dust, about a cell, proton atoms, maximum, no one knew anything. And this is how it lasted for 10 orders of magnitude, if on the logarithmic axis, in this cut, from below to above limited. Humanity lived for a long time, before the invention of the microscope and telescope. It all happened on the border of the 15th-16th century. At the same time, Galileo invented telescopes from a telescope. He began to look at the sky, at the planets, at the moon. And at the same time, their Leeuwenhoek, in my opinion, I don't remember, invented microscopes and began to examine these microorganisms. And here in the warehouse, it is just visible in the picture. 1600th year, it was a borderline 1, gradually every century expanded by 2 or 3 orders of magnitude. Improved with telescopes, looked further, microscopes turned out to look rough. But a real explosive breakthrough occurred on the border of the 19th and 20th centuries. Because that's when Hubble, not the Hubble telescope, but the Hubble astronomer. Because the word Havel only evokes some, associated, with only one device. A cop, yes. He is an American astronomer who started observing and saw galaxies. He began to study them. I saw them expand. There was an idea that we have a huge metagalaxy, in which there are billions, even tens of billions of galaxies. There are hundreds of billions of stars in every galaxy. This all happened literally at the beginning of the 20th century. The same thing happened. People began to look at the microscope, saw the atoms, saw. They saw it in the sense of not with their eyes, of course, but began to shine through. They began to understand how it all works there. And among other things, we have already reached the nucleus there in general because this model, the dispute between Thomson and Rutherford, how the atom works, is either a pudding or, so to speak. It is a nucleus and orbits. It was just the beginning of the 19th century. And suddenly humanity, here in the picture, you can see how these curtains would open. Out of 10 orders of magnitude, a person came out to 61 orders of magnitude. Imagine 6 times. But that's 6 times in the logarithmic dimension, which is a scary thing, because 10 times is already a billion billion. And then they just opened everything up for a row. And now humanity is in the 20th century. It lives in this world. And how this world is beautifully arranged, we are going to see a movie now. Why? Because there is a wonderful film that shows our mental journey deep into and beyond. So, we have watched a wonderful emotional film that shows how deeply humanity has penetrated into the microcosm, how high it has risen into space, how our large-scale horizons have expanded. Here, but I just promised to show you how it affected our lives. It is perfectly clear on this slide that all the achievements that we are currently using, they are obtained thanks to the expansion of the large-scale horizon and penetration into the microcosm, because all of our chips are already nanometers. Genetics is also nanometer-sized. Let's say a crystalline study of a substance. This is already very close to the stress study. Nuclear energy is all ours, atomic bombs, which have made the world more or less stable with respect to war. This is something even deeper. This is already 10 minus the 13th degree of centimeters in Fermi. Here, and whatever we took, even organic chemistry, ordinary chemistry, the study of chemistry, genetics, cytology, the study of tissues and other things, without microscopes, absolutely none of this would have happened. And we wouldn't be sitting with you right now and talking like this, because all this technology is practically a consequence of the fact that people have climbed into the world of this material, and it operates there already technologically. We wouldn't have known about our planet if we hadn't gone up into space, and going into space is a corresponding increase in scale. And all our ideas about the cosmos, about the universe, our knowledge, our reasoning, it's all a consequence of this very breakthrough, which I call a large-scale revolution of human consciousness. Right here on this slide, it's all shown. But this breakthrough, he had a very naturally useful consequence for us, for humanity. But at the same time, it always happens that everything useful is accompanied by difficulties. And these two difficulties, a lot of them actually arose after this breakthrough. I'm going to try to explain now what two problems arose from this breakthrough. The first problem is the stratification, differentiation of knowledge, loss of a holistic perception of the world. It was there before, but now it has just escalated to the limit. The second problem, the loss of the meaning of human existence in the vast universe. Here is the first problem. I will tell you my personal example. I worked in a laboratory that dealt with the strength characteristics of materials. This is a specialized laboratory. We had 12 employees there, 12 tables in 2 rooms. We were sitting, and each was engaged in his own question. And if I went to the next table and tried to tell what I was doing, then I was not understood in the laboratory. And I didn't understand what my neighbor was doing. This is in one laboratory that was engaged in micro-strength characteristics. It would seem common problems. I was surprised to find out that. And when I made a small micro-opening, it turned out that under certain conditions, the wear resistance of some material, for example, rubber, is higher than a hard alloy. It would seem that this is just absolute, so to speak, nonsense. But it was because I opened this case. I went to the director of the institute and explained it to him. He said, "This can never be, close it and don't tell anyone, because they will consider you abnormal, right? Rubber can't be more wear resistant." Why? Because here I made a discovery, but even in the laboratory, in my native institute, I was not recognized. And then I went to defend my dissertation, so to speak, and there at the Gubkin Institute, Professor Sorokin, it turns out, also dealt with this topic. And he said, yes, of course, because there the elastic plant of energy leads to the fact that it is extinguished. And here it is. That is, what am I talking about? To the fact that the world, the modern world, is such a mosaic. There is a certain scientist sitting in each cell, and he is engaged in his field and sees only this area. All right. He knows everything, about nothing, let's say so. Of course, it's not really like that. Well, a very narrow area. And the whole big picture, in fact, humanity has now lost. Therefore, now there is such a craving for religion again, because there is a general picture there. What no? Good or bad, we will not judge now, but there is. And science doesn't have it. Here is a book by the famous Nobel Prize winner Abdusalam, in my opinion. No, I don't remember now. Yes, in my opinion, Salam. Here, who was just trying to write this general picture. But he even said himself that his colleagues accused him of reductionism because he tried to deduce all the laws of nature from the interaction of elementary particles. Imagine, here I am, he says, now I will prove to you that by studying the interaction of protons, electrons, and neutrons, I will explain the whole world. Even sedition. Yes, even colleagues said. He was making excuses there. They accused him of reductionism. Why? Because it is impossible to explain the whole and happiness. This is the first problem. That's actually the problem, she is. Well, you can't say that this is some kind of threshold. The fact is that even the Bible says that there is a time to scatter stones, there is a time to collect stones. That's just what it is to throw stones. The fact is that the Western European civilization, when it had a scientific study of the world, it could not study the whole world. Biologists began to study biology separately, human doctors separately. Someone started studying geology, someone started studying physics. This had to be done because these details had to be studied first in order to put together the overall picture later. But they studied it, but they couldn't put it together. The overall picture does not add up. Therefore, such contradictions are, in fact, a separate topic. Huge in the scientific picture of the world exist, which is actually a complete picture lost. This is the first problem. The second problem, this is the loss of the meaning of human existence in the vast universe. But now I'm going to illustrate it all with pictures. That's the problem of losing integrity. This is the most famous problem of blind sages who examine an elephant and who say, let's say, takes a peek, it's a tusk, let's say. Ears that are a fan, a wall that is, a rope that is, the same object an elephant. But the blind sages, each holding onto his part, they explain this elephant in different ways. That is the most modern science, from my point of view. It sees this world differently. The same picture has developed with the second problem, the so-called lost in the universe. That is, people gradually began to understand that there is a human world, which previously seemed to be a world under God's providence, created in such a way that God loves man. He created this world for him in the Bible, as it was said. Man created the earth. God created the earth for man. Be fruitful, multiply, I will look after you. Well, that's the picture. A good person felt himself under this eye, in the center of this world. Everything was wonderful for a person. And suddenly this world exploded. And it turned out that our Earth is a tiny part of the solar system. The solar system is a tiny part. This slide shows the galaxies. And the galaxy is a tiny part. Galaxy cluster, galaxy cluster. And even this slide, which I took from the internet, is called at the back of the universe. That's not my term at all. A man. The whole picture crumbled, and assessing this condition, two scientists very accurately determined it. Vernadsky wrote at the time that by increasing the world to an extraordinary size, the new scientific worldview, at the same time, did not harass a person with all his interests and achievements, did not harass all the phenomena of life, to the position of an insignificant detail in space. This insignificant detail in space, no matter how we tell ourselves, is actually sitting in our subconscious and disturbing us. And we are trying to find compensatory mechanisms to compensate for our insignificance. In fact, this is not an insignificant detail, and we will talk about it. Or the famous cosmologist Davis American wrote that humanity has not been able to fully recover from the intellectual shock generated by the fact that the Earth has lost its privileges. In other words, these are ideological shocks. I know the very severe consequences of this shock in the minds of many people who have not recovered from this shock. They don't even realize that they got traumatized in their youth when they learned about this huge world. But I can say such a vivid example. I lived in Volgograd. We have a neighbor on the entrance there, even on the floor. For example, she is a normal woman who went about her business. But when he found out that the Americans landed on the moon, I will not interpret landed or not landed, but at least she was informed that the moon is not such a round disk in the sky, but some planets on which you can walk. Here, she's a little. She turned over in consciousness. She became conscious and was taken away by a psychiatrist and treated. That is, a person here could not even put this fact in his head. In other words, these are serious things, in fact. You don't have to think about it. You can immerse yourself in everyday life. You can, so to speak, at the same time drink every night and not cheat and forget about it. But all the same, the subconscious mind is sitting on this fact. There's no getting away from it. What to do about it, right? And that's why the task I set in the 70s, it was, as a matter of fact, formulated. Determine what place a person occupies in the large-scale hierarchy of the universe. Why? Because we are talking about our three-dimensional world. This is one slice. But these stars, galaxies, this is a large-scale dimension. And atoms, molecules, and so on. This is the whole depth of this. What place do we occupy here? But before we get right to this point, to the analysis, I would like to make a small methodological digression. Water. Why? Because we can compare each other with each other. Well, for example, I'm 10 centimeters taller than you, for example. I'm 1 meter 90 tall, and you're probably 1 meter 80. Well, 176, 114 centimeters. And this already tells us something. But if we compare a pug with an elephant on this slide, yes, then we can't say that, let's say. An elephant is 4 meters bigger than a pug. It's about nothing. You understand, right? I'm talking about a pug and an elephant. We are not going to compare, let's say, Moscow and the Earth yet. But the Earth is bigger, so to speak, by 10,000 kilometers. That is, again, about nothing. And how to compare? And there is a very good mathematical technique. How many times more? Not by how much, but by how much. And this is how much a completely different world translates us into. The world of logarithms, the world of proportions. And it doesn't matter what we measure. I am often asked why I measure everything in centimeters. Here's a pug, she's 10 times smaller than an elephant. And it doesn't matter how we measure the pug. Bast shoes, parrots, boas, centimeters, inches, fathoms. It doesn't matter how we measure the pug and the elephant, it will still be 10 times smaller than the elephant. That's very interesting. This dimensionless proportional measurement allows us to compare a huge sun with small planets. A pug with an elephant. Here, math is everything. Here, I just remind you of a small mathematics course at the time, the logarithmic axis. Here it is depicted here. The top line is a full-fledged 1. Here we have 100,000 there, a billion, 10 billion. If we translate it all into degrees, we get 10 into the 5th 10/10. 10/5 is 5 zeros. 10/10 is 10 zeros. 10 28 28 zeros. It's very simple. So mathematicians are too lazy to write 10 in the 5th. They just write. The holographic axis is written 5, 10. That is, if you see the number 5 or 10 or 3 or 2.5, this corresponds to some number of zeros in plus. In minus, it is written with a minus sign. That is, 1 divided by 10 in the 5th is 10 minus the 5th or minus the 5th simply. That is, in the future, when you look at the slides that I will show, it is the scale axis that is used everywhere. And this allows us to place on a piece of paper, let's say, the entire biological world of multicellular, from rotifers to sequoias. On one leaf, where is the rotifer? There's a size she has there 1/10 of a centimeter. Where's the sequoia? 100 meters. And everything is here on a piece of paper. Moreover, it turns out that all objects in the universe, ranging from the fundamental Planck length of 10 minus 33rd degree centimeters to the entire metagalaxy, are quietly placed on a piece of notebook paper. Here's a look. Everything is here, everything we know, everything is on a piece of paper, thanks to this logarithmic system. Well, so we finished the first part of the water, as it were. Now we are getting to the most interesting part. You said so, colorfully gave an example that. They showed that humanity has stepped deeply forward, as if the shutter of the camera was open. Yes. Due to what, in your opinion, there was such a leap, which, on the one hand, led to the technological results that we have today. And on the other hand, you yourself say that this has led to quite sad consequences from the point of view, that people have stopped perceiving this world as a whole. And even in those manifestations at the level of some kind of research, at the level of their work, scientific research, and so on. Due to what did this happen? Well, if the answer is simple, then it happened due to scientific and technological progress, due to the development of microscopes and telescopes. But if you just answer, you understand what this means. Development of telescopes, microscopes, and allowed, consequence, cause, metaphysical meaning. This is a separate topic. It is as follows. The little man lives in a multidimensional world, and a person has consciousness. Everyone has it individually, especially intuition, is a multidimensional consciousness. But in fact, from this multidimensional relation of the intuitive world, formal consciousness comes out, unfortunately. We pull out very multidimensional models. That is such an example. Let's say if you take an object and project it as a plane, then you get projection 1, projection 2, projection 3. Each of these projections reflects only from the side. Let's say, from this side, there are 3 projections that give us an axonometric image, and it turns into 3 projections. So, in fact, the whole creation, the social consciousness of humanity, it is a projection of the general consciousness, to which we have not yet grown up, let's say so. In other words, I'm not talking about Atlantis, which may have just the general knowledge of this world. But I agree with Plato that what a person sees is some. You know Plato's idea. You're sitting in a cave, you see some shadows, and the sun is shining behind you, which you don't see. Here is the model the same until about the next time for all people. In other words, we see a biased picture of the world, but some projection. And here changes are taking place. It's evolving. For example, during the Renaissance, artists discovered the 3rd dimension. And the creation of humanity from 2-dimensional over the past centuries has turned into 3-dimensional. We now see the depth. We understand what it is with a change in distance, the size changes. And in the medieval paintings, nothing changed at all. That is, there was no projection, there was no 3rd dimension, there was no change in depth, and so on. This was done by artists in the 15th century. We have opened this perspective. Now we are on the threshold of transition from a model of a 3-dimensional world to a model of a 4-dimensional one. This, in the 20th century, well, in general, has already been predicted by artists such as Dali and Escher. Writers like Lewis Carroll and some science fiction writers. Attempts to break through to a 4-dimensional modeling of the world, not perception, but modeling of the world, and in the 2020th century. That's what I'm doing. I think I've opened the door to a 4-dimensional model of the world. I see, right? We'll figure it out with you now. Okay, yes, we will understand. Yes, we will understand. We will understand. We will understand. So now it means the large-scale center of the universe. If we arrange all the objects that modern science knows from the fundamental long bar, from Maxim Markov 33rd to 1027th, 1028th is all in centimeters up to metagalaxy, then they occupy 61 orders of magnitude in this interval. Well, 60 orders of magnitude rounded up. So that's what's interesting. It turns out that they are, we'll come back to this later, all the most important objects, such as, let's say, protons, neutrons, up to 99% of the mass of the universe, right? Here at the level of elementary particles. There are a lot of elementary particles there. A lot. But the whole mass, that's 99%, is nucleons. Next, hydrogen, the most common element in the universe, and so on. That is, if we place the most common, most typical, most mass-intensive objects of the universe on a scale axis. In other words, we will just take, look at the size, and place it on the scale axis in accordance with this size. Let's say there's a proton. How much does it have there? He has a radius there, let's say 6 Fermi, 8 Fermi. The diameter is 16 Fermi. Fermi is converted to centimeters. We get 10 minus the 13th degree of a centimeter, with a coefficient of 1 and 6/10. Hydrogen. Well, there's 1 and 4/10 of amma, too. We take in translation, a centimeter of 10 the 8th we have. A star. We have. The galaxy is located. In other words, elementary. We do the classification. In accordance with the cell, we are located. We are bringing it to a single system. Well, we just arrange them according to their size. When I started doing it, I had my own motives. I suddenly found out that it was all arranged periodically. And there is a period of 10 in the 5th. Here in the picture, the legacy can be seen. In other words, the main objects of our universe, including our cell and our cells, they are located on the scale axis, not randomly, but strictly periodically. We will demonstrate this period now and then very strict. 10 to the 5th degree, 5 orders of magnitude. Moreover, the entire interval of 60 orders of magnitude is divided, respectively, 5 orders of magnitude, into 12 sections. That is, there are 12. There are 12 floors in the universe in the scale hierarchy. Each floor has its own objects. That is, here we have galaxies. Here we have, let's say, there are the nuclei of galaxies. There are stars, the nuclei of stars. Planets, people, cells, and so on, and so on. That is, some objects live on each of these floors in 5 orders of magnitude. It's strict. Are we taking the universe? The whole universe. the whole universe. And if, on which we see, it is called metagalaxy. And if we go beyond the boundary of the universe, this is done. The same. Also the same action. We don't have any data, but there is an academician, or rather a Soviet academician Markov, who in the 78th year published a book on the nature of matter, who tried theoretically to look beyond these boundaries. What is there beyond the metagalaxy, and what is there in the depths of the microcosm in this fundamental Planck particle? And he suddenly, unexpectedly, theoretically discovered such a paradox. We will not talk about it, that our entire metagalaxy can be an elementary particle of a galaxy, a metagalaxy of a larger scale. But these very smallest particles, which we consider as fundamental particles, Planck, inside may contain the same metagalaxy as ours. He has a theory there. This theory, by the way, is based on the general theory of relativity. In fact, there it's all still mentioned in all textbooks, his idea here. This is not some marginal idea that has fallen on him from somewhere. Moses Alexandrovich Markov. He was a well-known academician, honored, he had many medals, orders, and so on and so on. And he came out with this idea into the white light. When I read this book, by the way, it really stimulated me. Either 74th or 76th year, the 76th year of the last century. I think, wow. It turns out that academic science is what it does, and that's what I want to do, too. And then I didn't miss, because then I was already at the reception of academician Sadovsky, director of the Institute of Physics of the Earth, also a very honored academician. He has a laureate of Stalin prizes and state prizes there, twice a hero of socialist labor there. This is a man who was engaged in testing atomic bombs at the Simplitinsk test site. I was in his office when we talked to him. I realized that he came up with the same ideas, that I came myself, and he has publications and works on this topic. That is, in fact, this idea of large-scale hierarchy and periodicity. It was in the air then. And moreover, look, if everything is created in the image and likeness, then if we take just a person, a specific one person, and we'll take him, and we'll take it even later, then, in my understanding, it also contains such a galaxy inside itself. Yes, and maybe the universe, I do not know. Something. It is necessary. We stand from an atom. Here it stands from an elementary particle, and according to the brand of an elementary particle, it can be a medical galaxy, then of course we are. But in fact, the question here is very complicated. We will not do it now. I'll tell you this. In fact, I have a book written on this topic. There is a lot of reasoning here. Here is the main book. Here is the most recent book called Here Are 10 Forms of Life in the Universe. In other words, reasoning on this topic, I came to the completely insane idea that there are other forms of life in the universe besides biological life. In the same way, she's crazy. Well, from the point of view of science, it is absolutely insane. Yes, that's why I'm doing liver. Yes, guys, I understand that I'm saying crazy things, but I'm not sorry. Here, that is, the stars are alive, the planets are alive, the galaxies are alive, the metagalaxy itself can also be alive. In other words, it is impossible to prove it, but there are some logical, systemological arguments that simply lead directly to this. Do you understand? This book is dedicated to this topic. Here. So I've already gone far from the main thing, from the fact that this is our universe. It is not arranged chaotically, but periodically. And moreover, then I realized that this periodicity is determined by wave-like processes in multidimensional space, which leads to pulsational resonances, frequency resonances. There is all a separate topic. I even have very interesting mathematical studies on this topic. It can be said separately. I realized that this is all a consequence of the large-scale harmony of our world. It's not by chance. These are the periods. These are nodes in standing waves. There is nothing accidental. Yes, these are nodes in standing waves. This has already been proven practically. But before we get to the nodes, let's see what's in the center of this whole scale range. That is, we know the left edge. This is the fundamental Planck length. It has a very fundamental significance of physics. Those who don't know can read. In fact, this is the edge of our penetration into the microcosm with the help of our methods, theoretically, and the right edge is our metagalaxy. This is all that we see in the sky, which the representation of modern cosmologists is expanding at a breakneck speed, at the speed of light, and even more than the speed of light now. Somewhere it is expanding there, but the boundaries are like this. If you take these boundaries like this and put them on this logical axis, and just take them purely mechanically, divide this segment 61 orders of magnitude in half, then we get a point. 61 orders of magnitude are divided in half. We will have -2 and 3/10 on the logarithmic axis. This is not a round figure. Strange. -2 and 3/10 in translation to a centimeter means 50 microns. 50 microns. It's very close to us. That is, the center, the large-scale center of the universe, is located at the dimensions of 50 microns. And what in our world is 50 microns in size? It turns out that the average size of a living cell just has this size. Here we are. Well, yes. That's what I'm asking. Yes. We have come to this. In what year will I say this now? In the 78th year, they came to this somewhere, or in the 76th, approximately. So far, so to speak, we are going. So that's what cells are. There are bacterial cells. I don't consider them. In this case, I'm talking about the nuclear cells that make up our body. Nuclear cells have size ranges, well, roughly speaking, from 10 microns to 100 microns. If we take the logarithmic mean, that's 50 microns. This is the average value, but it's actually one order of magnitude. If we take 61 orders of magnitude, divide 160 by 61, we get an error of 1.5%. That is, even if the average size is walking in this range from 10 microns to 100 microns. Then this entire error will be within 1%. For the theories that modern science builds, an error of 15% is considered good. The margin of error is 1%. There is no such exact theory, in fact. Almost never happens, but it happens. But we have a good margin of error. Therefore, we are talking about the average value of a living cell, which, as we understand it, is the source of life. It is located exactly in the large-scale center of the universe. The cell is so many times bigger than the smallest particles of our universe, maximum. How many times smaller is it than the entire meta-galaxy? And it doesn't matter what we measure it with, centimeters, meters, or kilometers, or parsecs. It doesn't matter at all because it's proportional. Remember the lobe and the elephant. Even if you measure this cell with slippers, you will still get this value. In other words, this is an indisputable fact that follows from the entire development of modern science. It developed to find boundaries. And you and I came up and found the center. It turned out that there was a living cell in the center. Well, it's an obvious thing. Why does science deny something? I'll tell you now. I'll tell you. She doesn't deny it. I'll tell you what. All right. Why doesn't she use it? I'll explain now. Why not use it is very simple. The fact is that when I discovered it, the first thing I wanted to share such a joyful discovery with all of humanity, of course. And that was your mistake. No. The head, Paul, the first person I saw a pleasant consonance of thought. I wrote him a letter from Kamchalov Mikhail, in my opinion, Mikhailovich. And I received a reply from this widow that he had died recently. But this widow invites me to a conference on theoretical classification in the city of Baroque, in my opinion. It was the 78th year or the 79th. I don't remember exactly anymore. Baroque in the Bagan Reservoir. I was invited there. I arrived, but I was already late because the conference was cancelled. I was told, you can only make a poster presentation. I arrived with 2 sheets of paper on which there were all these pictures. And I placed them in the lobby. And in the lobby, people, coming out after all the performances, came in, looked at my pictures, asked questions, and so on. And then suddenly there was such a sensational thing when, during a conference, a very well-known system engineer, speaking, said, "You are looking for a general classification theory there. It's over there at the dry nose hanging in the lobby. The people saw the light, woke up. How is that so? I didn't know that. I became the lobby, walked, so to speak, nervously around my own these very contests. Suddenly people come running. Everyone starts asking them questions. Well, God theoretically pointed to me, so I guess I'm right. And the organizers of the conference came up to me and said, 'Listen, Sergei Ivanovich, don't you want to speak?' I say, 'Of course.' 'Well, let's give you 7 minutes at the end of the conference.' I say, 'Why 7? We can't do it anymore. That's just 7. I still remember those 7 minutes I was given at the conference. And there were people like Schrader. Such a great cardinal was then our, so to speak, I would say, philosophical science. Mean Sergei Viktorovich, fine. Barantsov Grigoryevich was there. Who wasn't there? There was a member of Korbaki there. In other words, there were representatives of the press, the whole country gathered there. There were physicists, biologists, cosmologists, so to speak, systemologists. And who just wasn't there? It was such an amazing conference, which was held on the basis of the idea that the world is really one, and can be studied using common methods, yes. And so I was given 7 minutes at the end. I performed, it made a good impression. Then I was approached by a correspondent of a magazine, I don't remember, from Novosibirsk. I remember the name only Svinin. Here, He told me, would you like to publish your theory in the Journal of Knowledge of Power? Is that so? And the Journal of Knowledge of Power, well, as it is now, you know, I do not know. Well, fundamentally, like Nature, the leading popular science magazine. I just love this magazine. I read everything here. I say, of course I want to. In the end, what is it? You know, you need to meet Schrader. I don't remember his name now. Well, it doesn't matter. With Julius Shade, yes. Here. And he can give you the way there. So I dragged these pan sheets, as I remember now, to Schrader's room. Schrader is such a gentleman. You know, there's a retinue of all sorts of scientific collaborators sitting around him, who are chirping at him. He looked like this. Well, tell me. Well, politely, of course. I laid it out there for about 5 minutes and told him everything. Yes. It's interesting. Here's the phone, the editorial office, the magazine with them. Call me, tell me from me. I speak well. I called, said I was from him. I was told to come. I came to the magazine of Knowledge of Power, turned around and Batman sheets. They looked at it and said, this is interesting, we will publish it. How will you start? I say, well, you know, I think so. Here's a look from afar. And why from afar? But there are deleted ones. Adam, the physicist Kulikov, introduced the work of the artist Sador Dali. And there are such representations that you look closely, so far away, so that's the view from afar. And at the same time from afar, and from the artist gave. They liked it very much, because they were a bit dissident, and Dali was then an opponent, so to speak, as you know, of our Soviet government. In other words, have you found such a formula? I didn't know he was an opponent, I swear. I was a man in general, I knew absolutely nothing. But apparently it also resonated. They gave an artistic image. In short, the article was published in 1981 year. It was published, and did not cause any protest of science. Moreover, Alexander Petrovich Ivanov is a very interesting person with this article. He was the academic secretary of the 3 vice presidents. The last one was Velikov, before that Logunov, and so on. In other words, he was his own man at the Academy of Sciences there. He was engaged in automation of the Academy of Sciences. He was the first person who coined the word Internet and the concept of the Internet in general. He worked at the Military Institute of Cybernetics in the 50s. He wrote this article in the Journal of Knowledge by virtue of me, as he later told me 20 years later when we met. Here, I didn't know that history. He says, I read the article, it seemed very interesting to me, and I went to show and give it to all academicians at the Academy of Sciences. All the academics read with interest and said, yes, a good article, a good article. There are no problems. Yes, indeed, all the facts are here. They are simply systematized, everything. He says, come to Logunov, to the president of the Academy of Sciences. I say, well, so and so. Well, it's necessary to invite a person somehow. Let him tell you more. The article is an article. Come on, invite, organize, says Logunov. In other words, they wanted to invite me to speak at the Presidium of the USSR Academy of Sciences. 78th year. I don't know. In 1981st year I came out, I was a member. I am a man from the province, with no degree, no rank, no position, having nothing. Suddenly I speak at the Presidium. There was nowhere higher to be understood in the Soviet Union, just in the scientific world. And they were interested in my work. There was no rejection. They started looking for me. Well, how were you looking for? They were looking for a doctor of sciences Sergei Ivanovich Suhonos in the academic environment. This was not found there. Couldn't find it. They didn't find it. And Tolgunov said, Ivanov, well, you know, he says, it's probably some provincial doctor. He will break through sooner or later. Yes, that's it. Ivanov abandoned this idea. And then we met him in Moscow when Ivanov was no longer working at the Academy of Sciences. Completely by accident. He saw me with amazement and said, are you the one? The one, something like that. He told me this story. Why am I telling you this in such detail? That there was no protest in science. These facts, why are they good? There is not a single fact invented there. Then I came up with it there. That's what I wanted to say. There wasn't. So I wanted to say, why was there no protest? Because, from my point of view, yes, because there is such an axiom that the truth is silent. And they, all these academicians of this entire Academy of Sciences, they subconsciously realized somewhere that what you said was true information. There was probably something to say in defense. And to begin, I didn't think so. It would probably be better to start regulating you somehow, too. It would not be consistent with their inner beliefs. And you just have them. They just spoke about what they were afraid to say, probably at the time. That's not the point. They weren't afraid to say it. Then I realized what the problem was. There was also an academician in biology, an academician of physics, an academician of space. And again, there was no integrity. This very cake is Napoleon. Everyone was a professional in his layer, but he never climbed on the neighboring layers. He could not understand this whole picture. He could not perceive and evaluate it. That's the problem. Here in this book, The Large-Scale Harmony of the Universe, it is shown that all the conclusions that I am reporting to you now, they have links. Which ones? To the sources. On the leading encyclopedia in the field of physics, biology. In other words, every figure that I took, I carefully checked and took it from well-known sources, and it is impossible to indulge in it, because these are well-known axiomatic things of science. I just made the location different, you know. I have reformatted the location of these numbers, these data. And then it turned out quite unexpectedly that there is a complete picture that was not there. It was not seen. Until I carefully laid it out, no one saw it. It's like, you know, a child's game of dice. We've already played some there. Now it's or there's something else out there. They lay out pictures. In other words, I used to play dice as a child because we didn't have these difficult games. And what are cubes? There are 8 or 6 facets. There is a piece on each face. You fold, then the bunny turns out, then the bird turns out. But when it's all chaotic, you can't see anything, right? That's when you fold it right. Do you see the bunny? Here is such a bunny I got accidentally almost. From the facts known to everyone. I just took a mountain of these facts, just shoveled it all over, passed it through myself, systematized it, and put it down. But we are returning to our idea that there is a living cell in the center of the large-scale proportional center of the universe. But living cells actually have sizes that are ranging from 10 to 100 microns. The nucleus of germ cells, oddly enough, almost all germ cells, even of a mosquito and an elephant, have dimensions of 30 to 50 microns. There's already a range of sizes. That is, if there are 10 to 100 microns, then there are 30 to 50 microns. That's exactly right. And what is the germ cell nucleus? This is our genome. This is all our information. You and I have come out of this core. We were that core once. Then we turned around, turned into people. So this is what it looks like in the picture. The slide here is clearly visible. Here is the female germ cell. This big dump is so huge. There is a core of 50 microns. And the male sperm, it's so long, small in fact, it's only about 7 microns there. The smallest cell, in my opinion, is the head. But the length of this spur is also 50 microns. And then what happens? Observe. It's just pictures from a biology textbook, right? This long 50-micron sperm comes up to this female peer, crashes into it. Then here you look sequentially at Ab. What's going on? Here he crashed, then his head penetrated into the female genital cell. He discarded this tail as unnecessary, like a rocket stage. And then this little head of his begins to slowly approach gradually to the nucleus of the female germ cell. In the process of approximation, it is made of 4 microns and says goodbye. It increases 10 times in size. Why? Because look at the slide. We need to merge. Merge. And now the 50-micron female-male genome is merging. It turns out that in the end we are with you, the genome from which we grew up, and then the process of division begins. But the merger takes place exactly at the large-scale center of the universe. This is an indisputable fact. You can so to speak. Test me as you like. I agree with that. Yes. So, the meeting place. I humorously a little bit, so to speak. It's all lifted up here, in the large-scale center of the universe. Cannot be changed. Remember the movie. Meeting place. Meetings. Here is the meeting place at the large-scale center of the universe. This is a female genital, and male germ cells are always found in a large-scale center, in all animals, and in you and me too. We all start, every person, every animal starts life from the large-scale center of the universe, the size of which is about 50 microns from the germ cell. The size of the core, which is so many times greater than the fundamental Planck length, of the lower dimensional boundary of our material world, how many times it is smaller than the size of the entire metagalaxy, of the upper dimensional boundary of our world. We all came out of the large-scale center of the universe, and you, and me, and that's it. Everything is alive. What's the point of that? This is a phenomenological fact that strikes the imagination, but, and what's coming after him? It took me 10 or even 20 years to figure out what the point was. We're going to get to that point now. But there is another interesting point here. Here, with sperm, the germ cell and the person himself are separated by 5 orders of magnitude on the scale axis. The same coefficient. Amazing. And here there are 2 cycles. One egoistic gene, I called it a cycle, and the second one is a spiritual monad. Now let's look at the selfish gene. What's going on? Sperm turns into a baby size is born. A person grows 10 to the 5th degree, then a person dies. But if he left an inheritance, then his gene repeats this cycle again. And we are inheriting our genome here. There is such a theory among biologists called the theory of the selfish gene. In other words, the gene, in fact, lives much longer than us, it continues. And moreover, our behavior, our life, there are also such studies, 70-90% depends on our genome. In other words, we are programmed with this genome in an amazing way. It was studied by twins. Once upon a time, it was discovered that the twins are divorced. One, let's say, a woman in England, the other in Australia. When they began to compare, the breeds of dogs of their favorite and up to the nicknames of dogs coincide. Well, so much. For example, of course, it may not be a coincidence, but there are a lot of coincidences. In other words, this is the genome that determines our life with you. And the other cycle is the spiritual monad. We're going to get there now. This is a much more serious thing than this selfish gene, but it must be brought to this. So that's it. Then, over time, I discovered that there is a grain of world memory, or a grain of world spirit in the universe, the dimensions of which are exactly 50 microns already. There is no scatter. The basis for this is set out in this book. I'm not going now. It's a wave. What are we like? It is a kind of structure invisible to us, which consists of maximums of particles of this space. And since it is big enough for them, there is a difference in size of 10 to the 30th degree, then the number of these maximums. Well, now we can say that this is the number of ether particles. That is, the ether consists of particles. The number of ether particles in this grain is 10 to the 90th power. Well, what is the 10 of the 90th degree? Completely incomprehensible numbers for everyone. I can say that the number of all atoms in the universe is 10 to the 78th power. In other words, there are 1,000 billion times more elements inside the grain of the world memory than there are atoms in the universe. Here is a small 50-micron grain that corresponds to the core of our genome, which can even be seen through a microscope. It is huge in terms of information capacity. Huge. I think that the universe or God could not pass by such a beautiful device, so to speak, such a flash drive, with such an information memory. Well, there is a primitive definition of the amount of information, according to the Sheehan formula. You know, yes, this is a factorial, the number of factorial elements. Well, let's say you have 10, well, 5 elements. 5 by 4 by 3 by 2 turns out to be 5, and 420 by 3 is 60, 220. 120 means the amount of information that can be written off from 5 elements. Rearranging them in different positions, it will be 120 bits. Well, you need to multiply 6 by 6. It will be 700 there with something. By 7, it means multiply by 7. It's growing like this. And it turns out that the amount of information that can be written on our DNA is 10 to the 10th power, that is, 10 billion of our Lisinki. This is 10 to the 10th power factorial. That's all that we have in our genes can be written with. Well, so the primitive formula of Sheng, of course, is not how everything is written there. For comparison, we don't know how everything is recorded inside this grain of world memory. But imagine 10 1090s. What's the difference? That is an incomparable difference. That is, the information capacity of this grain, which I deduced purely theoretically on the tip of a pen. It is huge, incomparably larger than the entire information capacity of the material universe. Not to mention our genes, our brains. We also have about 10 dozen neurons in our brain. 10/10th. And here it's 10/90th. A huge difference. So that's where everything is recorded, everything is stored there. Each is our view. Absolutely. Every action we take, every choice we make. And this is it, not only ours with you, everything in general. Of course, everything we have. All that. I show it to everyone. I say, this is the flash drive, right? This is the grain of world memory. Now I'm going to insert this flash drive into the computer, into our material world, and an image, some kind of movie will appear. This is the film Our Life. We'll see something on the screen here. Then we click on the stop video button, and after making some changes to our movie, they will be recorded back to the flash drive. That is, save it. They pressed a button, saved it, pulled it out, and then the grain of world memory, preserved by the memory of our life, can be transferred anywhere in the universe, to any planet, any other. It doesn't matter where absolutely. And there again, to stick, so to speak, into something real, to be embodied. And these cycles can last thousands, millions of times. And every time, all the information that we collect, it is recorded and accumulated. That's the theory. Completely unprovable. what the esotericists call the Akashic records. When I discovered all this, I was started. Esotericists attacked me just like hungry for food. They said, finally, the scientist has got to the things that we have known for a long time. And they started educating me. In the 90s, all the esotericists enlightened me and told me everything about the Chronicles. And then I found out that I hadn't really discovered anything new from an ideological point of view. I just discovered it all from the point of view of physics, combinatorics of numbers. I came to the same conclusions as them, but on a different base. And this seems to me to be interesting, because some are already appearing here. Very interesting. Dimensions, a specific amount of information. In other words, it is already comparable to everything. This is no longer such an abstract thing as esotericists imagine. That's how it is. This is already science. It can already be described. Here it is very. In esotericism, I was sometimes told, well, here you are, says the scientist, yes. Here you are crawling your knowledge, comprehending this world. That's when you finally get to the truth. You see on top of this truth us esotericists who have been sitting there for a long time and smoking their esoteric bamboo. Well, in general, they are probably right to some extent. Or they burn bonfires there. In other words, they are already there, but science is not there yet, because science, I repeat again, is an area that needs to be technologically implemented later. That is, if science says it should say B, it should give the technology of use. If she can't give the technology, then she can't. And then the tools. The tools are different tools, but they all complement each other. So, the period of pulsations. But through these very seeds of the world spirit, of which there are a huge number in the universe, because this is the second harmonic. I think that the whole universe is permeated with these grains, and they are connected to each other through thin information threads. Here in the picture, it's from the internet. I can see it well. We are a kind of node, like a neuron of this brain, of the entire universe, in fact. Here's the picture shown here. That is, through this brain here, we are part of the whole consciousness of the entire universe, in fact, informational. So, a large-scale periodicity. There will be a little less emotions, there will be more facts. Section. In other words, I have already said that this is all periodic. That's what you can see here on the slide, how it's all periodic. And with what degree of accuracy is this periodicity? Here on the slide, I just tried to determine the degree of accuracy. The fundamental Planck length is a well-known thing in all encyclopedias. It is determined by the formula that is presented here. Planck's constant multiplied by the grace 1, divided by the speed of light in a cube, and all this is the square root. Why exactly is this the length of the bar? It is necessary to look into theoretical physics and understand that the bar, it is not just sucked out of your finger. There is a certain logic there. But this is really the minimum size that modern physics can allow to exist. This is the lower boundary of the microcosm. Here is the exact meaning of this lower boundary of the microcosm. You can see it here on the slide. Well, we simplify, yes. 1.6 by 10 minus 33rd degree centimeters. If you translate it all into a power, then it's 10 minus 32 and 8. Such ugly numbers. But why am I doing this? Why? Because if we multiply this fundamental Planck length 5 times by a factor of 10 in the fifth, which I discovered, of the scale periodicity, then we get a value of 1 and 6, 1 and 5 and 8 by 10, minus the 13th degree of a centimeter. Let's round this value to 1 and 6 tenths by 10 minus the 13th degree of a centimeter. With a certain degree of accuracy, measuring the diameters of protons, physicists came to the conclusion that the diameter of a proton is 1 and 6 tenths by 10 minus the 13th degree of centimeters, which was exactly what had to be proved. Moreover, the measurement accuracy here is low, but the accuracy of calculations here, as you can see, is infinite. Because they are constant, they have a numerical value there. There are 5, 7, 8 decimal places. That is, the theoretical value does not contradict at least. And what is a proton, and what is a neutron? They have the same size. That's 99% of the mass of the universe. These are the fundamental building blocks of which absolutely everything is built. And they have the same meaning. But we don't stop. We multiply by 10/5 again, and we get the following value of 1 and 6 tenths by 10, minus the 8th degree of centimeters. It's a little bit not accurate here, because according to the calculations of modern chemists, the diameter of the hydrogen atom, the most common, is 1 and 4 tenths by 10 minus the 8th degree of centimeters. But there the thing is that the diameter is determined by the density of the electron cloud, and the density is so different. And they take at a certain point of inflection and say, here we measure. And if you extend it further, then maybe 1 or 6. Not the point. The bottom line is that the accuracy in the second decimal place, or even in the first decimal place, at scales of 30 orders of magnitude, It's just so I thought there is an accuracy, an error somewhere 0.00005%. So it turns out that the chemists are not correct in their calculations. No, them, they, the chemists, do not have rigid balls of atoms. There is also, but they can't count because, no, they think correctly. But the thing is, how to count. It can be considered according to the densest. There's an inflection of density there. That's it. Here you can count it. I say they don't come up with exact numbers because, no, because they are, I believe. It's enough for them, really. They have enough. Then no. But we went further. We multiplied again and again. I'm missing one multiplication. We multiplied the Planck's fifth fundamental length 7 times by 10. What did we get as a result? We got a fantastically accurate figure, which is equal to 1 and 6/10 by 10 in the second power of a centimeter. What is it? Let's translate it into ordinary human language. This is 162 centimeters, or 1 meter 62 centimeters. I repeat again, we got this value by multiplying the physics constants, the Planck length, because it is based on the gravitational constant, the speed of light, and Planck's constant. We multiplied them by the periodicity symmetry coefficient 7 times by 10/5 to get the value of 162 centimeters. This is a theoretically calculated value that cannot be changed in any way, absolutely. That is, try as hard as you can, but you can't change it. And what does it correspond to? And here I raised the data on the growth of people in the world. The great Soviet encyclopedia had these data. And in the 20th century, average height of a person, 162 centimeters. Average height. We believe that these are small people, 162 centimeters. Because here I am meter 90, meter 76. Yes, but in India, these are almost giants, because there the average height of women is 145 centimeters. The average height of men is 156 centimeters, and there are billions of Hindus. If we multiply these billions by the Chinese, them too. The Chinese have grown a little now. The Japanese have grown 6 centimeters. In the 20th century, then I looked at the skeletal data on anthropologists of the previous, then the Middle Ages. Knights, these famous armor, do you remember what they look like? Given. Small ones, 162 centimeters. That is, for the last 10,000 years at least, or even 100,000 years. The average height was 162 centimeters. Even Neanderthals had an average height of 162 centimeters, measured by skeletons. However, recently, thanks to all these additives, accelerators and others, so to speak, it has grown somewhere 4 by 6 centimeters. But what about the 3-meter giants? And this is a separate topic. There's a bimodal picture, actually. There are 2 mods there. This one, which I'm telling you, is the main one, and the other one on the right always accompanies. There is. And in fact, these are not fairy tales, because skeletons are found there really on the site. But this topic is like this. If I start spreading all this further now, the theory that is set out here on bimodality, multimodality, they're to give calculations, then we will never finish, even before morning. And they don't want to. Well, I see. So let's stop. On what conclusions? The fact that the average height of a person over the past centuries, millennia even, maybe from tens of thousands of years, practically fluctuates around the value of 162 centimeters back and forth. This value, whether we want it or not, is exactly theoretically calculated for the entire universe, not for Earth. Why? Because in the whole universe, these values of protons, neutrons, and the fundamental constants of the gravitational constant, of the speed of light, they are universal. This is a universal height of 162 centimeters. We came to this conclusion. That's what to do with it. I do not know, to be honest, until now. But it's impossible to dismiss this conclusion. You know, right? It cannot be erased with an eraser. Let's go further. So, 12 levels. Oh yeah. Then, when I began to look at the 12 levels, I realized that it was still best to use such a Cassini. But we will call it just a sinusoid, in fact. Why? Because this wave-like picture reflects that all objects have, as it were, 12 half-waves here for this entire period, in fact. They are clearly divided into objects and cores. Well, for example, a star is the core of a star in 5 orders of magnitude. A galaxy is the core of a galaxy in 5 orders of magnitude. Man is the nucleus of a cell of 5 orders of magnitude. An atom is the nucleus of an atom of 5 orders of magnitude. And so if we are human atoms, stars, and galaxies, we place these objects, and the bottom row is the nuclei. Nuclei, cell nuclei. I see. That is, there are 2 rows. Structural I. And at first I got it purely phenomenologically, and then I realized that this is not phenomenology. There are large-scale fluctuations, a lot of harmonics. We are not going to dive into this now. So, the periodicity of the scale structure of the universe. This is a manifestation of the wave processes of pulsation of all forms of the universe with a huge spectrum of their frequencies. The main pulsation is the breath of the universe. As a result of the pulsation, a common standing wave is formed with stable nodes, which, like tractors, create zones with the greatest saturation of shapes of this dimension. These are nodes of standing waves, large-scale structures of the universe. Only this can explain the phenomenal accuracy of the main periodicity of the universe. I have a whole theory developed on this topic, but it's not right now. Moreover, it is very interesting. It turned out that all absolutely large-scale structural patterns of all integral large complex objects, they all have exactly this periodicity, 12 periods. Now, if we roll up our vegetables, which we depicted in the form of a ring, then we will get a metagalaxy, a veil, a person, and so on and so on. Take a look. Yad galaxy? Got it. Exactly the same clock structure. On your watch, if you look, at 12 o'clock there is maximum and the universe. And the person is at 7 o'clock, and the cage is at 6 o'clock. Do you understand? 60 minutes, 12 hours in 5 orders of magnitude. Same structure. From where? How did they know when this watch was made, so to speak, in Babylon? Why exactly is this so? Subconsciously, they went out to the same requests again. The law, it doesn't matter. You take the universe, you take a cell, you take anything, if you structure it, you get 12 levels. In fact, it's all generally mathematically and physically simply explained there. Moreover, our universe is from its center, well, roughly speaking, when the explosion occurred. Explosion. It was divided into 12 planes. But I don't know that, so we won't do it now. We will then try to persuade the same thing. And if we add even more, so to speak, here is the dial, the universe. Next, 12 semitones. I mean, well, we all know that we have an octave of do-do-do. It is divided into 7 notes. But if you look at least the same piano keyboard, there are also some 5 black keys. What is it? These are sharp and flat. In fact, how to do it all. A Chinese prince, when you were in some century ago, he took and divided a dodo interval into 12 sections. In other words, he took the root of the 12th degree from 2, got the division of a dodo into 12 sections. That is 12 semitones of notes, in fact. And so on. And so I talked to the artist, he theoretically proved to me that there is, to a certain degree of certainty, the division of the color scheme into 12 sections, too. It's not a rainbow, but everything is a little different there. But it is, so to speak, to the artist to this question. And where did the 12 zodiac signs come from? There were more of them there at first. There were 28 zodiac signs, something else there. Then it all danced. The 12 signs of the zodiac settled down. But here our ecliptic is divided into 12 sectors. Why 12? Why 12 levels? 12. Why 12 months, after all? Why 12? There is an answer in my books to this question. We are not going to go deeper now. We just throw such a tempting picture of consciousness. So, we have considered where the cell is located, but we have not considered where a person is in this large-scale dimension of the universe. It's also interesting, that is. Very interesting. Yes, and we're getting to that now. This is probably the most interesting thing. Well, not the most, but still very interesting too. A man in a large-scale dimension of the universe. We come back to this wave-like, so to speak, large-scale hierarchic model. And we see there from 3 sections of 5 orders of magnitude. These are living objects. Here they are from above. Life is written there, right. So we cut them out, throw them here on a piece of paper. What do we see? From viruses -5 and 5, this is the smallest virus to the entire biosphere as a whole. There are exactly 15 orders of magnitude, and these 15 orders are divided into 3 sections. These are cells, these are organisms, these are populations, societies. The boundaries between them are clear, and all these objects occupy 5 orders of magnitude on the scale of each of them. Absolutely. Here. It's all painted here. Is this what it looks like in nature? The bottom row is unicellular, the middle ones are multicellular, and the upper ones are biocenoses. That is, the same, only more colorful. So, a person with his size, too, is absolutely exactly in the large-scale center of the earthly range of life. A person is so many times bigger than a virus. How many times is he smaller than the biosphere? So many times. By 7.5 orders of magnitude, we will stand back from the left edge and 7.5 from the right. That's why the man. Is there a center of the universe? I don't know, but a person somehow managed to capture a large-scale center of life on planet Earth and does not let go of this center. There's too much on us here. Too much depends on our choices. Exactly. Too much depends on our actions in accordance with these elections. That is, you can, of course, interpret this fact as you like. Well, interpret it as you want. But this fact cannot be dismissed now. Already see now with this. Thank you, Sergei Ivanovich. A person is in a large-scale center of biology. Lived quietly, now I won't live. And now I'm going to live with it. That's it, see. Well then, it's so many times bigger. In other words, just like a living cell, it is located in the large-scale center of the entire solar galaxy. Man is in the large-scale center of the entire biosphere. This is a fact. To finish this topic on very beautiful poetic notes, here we have a wonderful poet, Arseny Tarkovsky. In 1953rd year, in my opinion, published his wonderful poem. I'll read it out with part of it. I'm a human being. I'm in the middle of the world. Behind me are myriads of infusoria. There are myriads of stars in front of me. I lay down between them at my full height, two shores connecting the sea, two spaces connected by a bridge. Arseny Tarkovsky, 1953rd year. When I was only 3 years old, he composed this poem. He was 50 years ahead of me. He knew, of course. Well, thank you for your attention. Yes, you can tell everything that I have told here fluently, very briefly, superficially, here, for the most part on emotions. All this can be thoroughly done here in this book of the large-scale harmony of the universe. But we are not the last time with you. Well, I hope so at the studio. Read it. Well, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I will answer. I thank you.